The Manhattan skyline gleamed under the crisp autumn sun of October 2025, its glass towers reflecting ambition and power. At the heart of this urban jungle stood the sleek headquarters of Carter Industries, a financial empire built by William Carter, a 42-year-old white American CEO whose name was synonymous with discipline and distance. His pale skin, sharp blue eyes, and impeccably tailored suits made him a striking figure, but his peculiar rule defined him: no physical contact with women, not a handshake, not a brush of shoulders, nothing. This boundary had been an unspoken law within the company for 2 decades, whispered about in break rooms and boardrooms. Some called it eccentricity, others suspected a deeper hidden wound. Either way, no one dared challenge it. On this particular morning, the 47th floor buzzed with a different energy. Employees exchanged glances, murmurs barely audible over the hum of printers and keyboards. A new assistant was starting today, and the office was alive with curiosity. Would she survive the cold, untouchable William Carter? Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about CEOs with mysterious rules. Have you ever encountered one in real life? Lauren Brooks, a 32-year-old Black American woman, stepped off the elevator confidently. Her deep brown skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her warm, radiant smile contrasted sharply with the sterile office environment. At 5'6", she carried herself with the poise of someone who had fought for her place in the world. Her dark curls were neatly pulled into a low bun, and her navy blazer and pencil skirt spoke of professionalism with a touch of flair. Lauren had no idea about William's rule, nor did she care for office gossip. She was here to do a job, and intended to do it well. Lauren's journey to this moment hadn't been easy. Raised in Harlem, she had grown up navigating systemic barriers, her ambition fueled by her late mother's words, "Never let anyone dim your light, Lauren." After earning a business degree through night classes while working as a community organizer, she'd clawed her way into corporate America, landing this coveted role at Carter Industries. Her colleagues, however, saw her arrival as a ticking time bomb. "She doesn't know," whispered Sarah, a junior analyst, to her coworker James. "No one told her about the rule," James replied, shaking his head. "This is gonna be a show. If you're enjoying this setup, give the story a thumbs up to let us know you're hooked. It helps us keep bringing you tales of unexpected connections." Lauren settled at her desk, a small station outside William's corner office. Her first task was simple: organize his schedule for the week. She felt thrilled as she scanned his calendar, packed with investor meetings and charity events. This was her chance to prove herself, but the air around her was heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken warnings. She caught James, a friendly 35-year-old Black man from the finance team, watching her with amusement and concern. "What's with the stares?" Lauren asked, raising an eyebrow. James leaned against her desk, coffee in hand. "You're in the lion's den, Lauren. William Carter doesn't do close encounters, especially with women." Lauren frowned, her curiosity piqued. "What, like he's allergic to handshakes?" James chuckled, "something like that. Just keep your distance and you'll be fine." Lauren nodded, but her mind was already turning. She wasn't one to shy away from a challenge, and with his mysterious rule, William Carter was starting to sound like one. Inside his office, William stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his pale hands clasped behind his back, as he surveyed the city below. At 6'2", his lean frame and sharp features gave him an air of untouchable authority. He'd built Carter Industries into a powerhouse through ruthless focus, never allowing personal distractions to derail him. His no-touch rule wasn't just a quirk. It was a shield forged from a betrayal that still haunted him. Today, though, he felt an unusual restlessness. A new assistant meant change, and William despised change. As Lauren sorted through emails, a notification popped up. "Mr. Carter, Requests your presence immediately. She grabbed her tablet and headed to his office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The door was ajar, and she knocked lightly before stepping inside. William stood behind his desk, his expression as cold as the glass behind him. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice clipped. "I need the investor report by noon. No delays." Lauren nodded, unfazed. "Got it, Mr. Carter. Anything else?" He studied her for a moment, her confidence unsettling him. "That's all," he said, turning away. As she left, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that she just walked into a puzzle, one she was determined to solve. William, meanwhile, felt a flicker of unease. Her presence was already different, and he wasn't sure why. What do you think is behind William's rule? Share your guesses in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to catch the next part of William and Lauren's story. The office settled back into its rhythm, but the stage was set. With her bold spirit and unyielding curiosity, Lauren Brooks was about to challenge the unbreakable rule of William Carter, a man who'd spent 20 years guarding his heart. Little did either know that this was the beginning of something that would forever change them. The morning light filtered through the towering windows of Carter Industries, casting sharp lines across the polished floors of the 47th floor. Lauren Brooks sat at her desk, her tablet glowing with William Carter's packed schedule. Her first day was already a whirlwind: emails to sort, meetings to confirm, and a lingering curiosity about her enigmatic boss. William's curt dismissal in their earlier meeting hadn't fazed her. She'd dealt with challenging personalities before. But the way his blue eyes had flickered just for a moment when she'd met his gaze intrigued her. There was a story behind that cold exterior, and Lauren was determined to uncover it. At 10:45 a.m., James, the finance team lead, poked his head around her cubicle. "Lauren, heads up. William needs a tie for his 11,000 investor pitch. Emma, his executive secretary, is swamped, so you're up." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "A tie? That's it?" James smirked. "You'd think so, but with William, nothing's simple. Check the executive closet at the end of the hall." Lauren nodded, grabbing her notepad and heading toward the closet, her heels clicking with purpose. She sensed James wasn't telling her everything, but she shrugged it off. How hard could picking a tie be? The executive closet was more like a boutique, with rows of pristine suits and a cabinet lined with ties in every shade imaginable. Lauren's eyes widened at the sight: silk, wool, patterned solids, at least 50 options. "Okay, what does a guy like William Carter wear?" she muttered, running her fingers over the fabrics. She imagined his sharp suits and stern demeanor. The navy seemed safe and professional. She grabbed a sleek navy tie, then hesitated, picking up a charcoal one. Better to have options than guess wrong. She knocked on William's office door, the heavy oak muffling her sound. "Come in," came his clipped voice. Lauren stepped inside, finding William behind his desk, adjusting the cuffs of his crisp white shirt. His dark hair was neatly combed, but his expression was as unyielding as the steel beams outside. "Ms. Brooks," he said, barely glancing up. The tie. Lauren held up the navy and charcoal options. "I wasn't sure which you'd prefer, so I brought two." William's eyes flicked to the ties, then to her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Navy," he said, extending his hand. Lauren stepped forward, handing him the navy tie. Their fingers didn't touch as he took it, but she noticed his careful precision, as if avoiding contact was second nature. She lingered, watching, as he fumbled with the knot, his usually deft hands betraying him. The tie twisted awkwardly, the knot lopsided and tight, like he was wrestling it into submission. Lauren's lips twitched. She couldn't help it. Her mother had taught her to tie a perfect Windsor knot for her brother's job interviews, and this was painful to watch. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone light but firm, "you're murdering that tie." William's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me." Lauren stepped closer, undeterred. "It's all wrong. Let me fix it." Before he could protest, she reached for the tie, her fingers brushing the collar of his shirt. and briefly the skin of his neck. The contact was fleeting, barely a second, but William froze his body rigid, as if an electric current had surged through him. Lauren focused on adjusting the knot, but didn't notice at first. She smoothed the fabric, tying a neat Windsor with practiced ease. "There," she said, stepping back. "Much better." William's breath hitched his hand instinctively, touching the spot where her fingers had been. His heart pounded not with the familiar repulsion he'd trained himself to feel, but with something else, something warm, unsettling, alive. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice tight. "Don't do that again." Lauren blinked, finally registering his tension. "What, fix your tie?" She frowned, confused. "It was about to strangle you." William's jaw clenched, his pale hands gripping the edge of his desk. "You touched me," he said, each word deliberate. Lauren's eyes widened, a mix of realization and defiance crossing her face. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was a big deal." She crossed her arms, studying him. "But seriously, what's the issue? I'm not contagious." William's gaze locked onto hers, his usually composed facade cracking just enough for her to see something raw, fear maybe, or pain. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low. "Just don't." Lauren hesitated, sensing she'd stumbled onto something more profound than office protocol. Her instinct was to push, to ask why, but his expression stopped her. There was a story here, one he wasn't ready to tell. "All right," she said, raising her hands in surrender. "No touching. Got it." She turned to leave, but paused at the door, glancing back. "For the record, the tie looks good now." William didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the desk, as if it held the answers he couldn't find. Lauren stepped out the door, clicking shut behind her. She returned to her desk, her mind racing. What was that about? James, lingering nearby, caught her expression. "Told you," he said, shaking his head. "You okay?" Lauren nodded, but her curiosity burned brighter. William Carter wasn't just a cold CEO. He was a puzzle, and she wasn't one to leave puzzles unsolved. Inside his office, William leaned back in his chair, his fingers still grazing the spot on his neck, where Lauren's touch lingered. For 20 years he'd avoided contact, each attempt by others met with discomfort, a visceral reminder of betrayal. But Lauren's touch was different. It didn't repulse him. It didn't trigger the panic he'd come to expect. Instead, it left a warmth. He couldn't shake a crack in the armor he'd worn for decades. He closed his eyes, trying to dismiss it as a fluke. It had to be. He couldn't afford to let anyone, especially not his new assistant, disrupt the control he'd fought so hard to maintain. But as he straightened his perfectly knotted tie, he knew something had shifted, and that scared him more than anything. Lauren Brooks sat at her desk on the 47th floor of Carter Industries, the hum of the Manhattan office a distant backdrop to her racing thoughts. The tie incident with William Carter lingered like a riddle she couldn't quite solve. His reaction freezing at her touch, his voice tight with something like fear, had been more than just annoyance. It was personal, raw, and it stirred something in Lauren. She couldn't back down from a mystery, especially not one wrapped in a tailored suit and a fortress of silence. She leaned back in her chair, her dark curls slipping loose from their bun as she stared at her tablet. William's schedule glared back: a board meeting at 2:00 p.m. A call with Tokyo investors at 4:00. But her mind wasn't on deadlines. It was on him. His sharp blue eyes and his hands gripped the desk, as if anchoring himself against her. Lauren wasn't naive. She knew the corporate world could be a minefield of egos and secrets. But William's rule, this no-touch barrier, felt different. It wasn't just a quirk. It was a wall, and she wanted to know why it existed. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood in Harlem, where she'd learned to read people like open books. Growing up, she'd watched her mother, a single parent and community advocate, navigate tough crowds with grace and grit. Lauren, her mother, used to say, people hide their pain by braiding their hair on their stoops. But if you listen, you'll see it in their eyes. Lauren had taken that lesson to heart, using it to connect with everyone from street vendors to city council members during her years as a community organizer. Now, in the sterile world of Carter Industries, she saw that same pain in William's gaze. He was hiding something, and she wasn't about to let it slide. The finance team lead James appeared at her desk, his coffee mug steaming as usual. He said, "You look deep in thought, leaning against the cubicle wall. Let me guess, still reeling from the tie fiasco?" Lauren smirked, setting her tablet down. Fiasco's a strong word. I just fixed the man's tie. Didn't know it'd cause a meltdown. James chuckled, his brown eyes glinting with amusement. That's William for you. For 20 years, no one's touched him. Not a handshake, not a pat on the back. You broke the streak, Brooks. Lauren tilted her head, intrigued. 20 years? That's not just a preference. That's intense. James nodded, lowering his voice. It's been that way since he took over the company. Some say it's a power move that keeps people at a distance. Others think it's personal, something from way back. Either way, tread carefully. He's not your average boss. Lauren's lips curved into a determined smile. Careful's not my style, James. You know that. She thought back to her first big win as an organizer, convincing a skeptical city board to fund a youth center in Harlem. It had taken months of listening, asking the right questions, and refusing to take no for an answer. William Carter might be a CEO, but he was still human. If she could crack a room full of bureaucrats, she could figure out what made him tick. Her mother's voice echoed again. Never let fear stop you from seeing the truth. Lauren wasn't afraid of William's walls. She was curious, and curiosity she knew was her greatest strength. Later that afternoon, Lauren delivered a stack of printed reports to William's office. She knocked, waiting for his usual clipped, "Come in," before entering. He was at his desk, reviewing a spreadsheet, his dark hair catching the light from the window. She said, the board meeting prep, placing the reports on his desk, carefully keeping her distance. William glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks. That'll be all." But Lauren lingered, her fingers tapping lightly on the folder, the Tokyo calls at Fort Yujuru. "I've flagged the key points in the investor brief. Anything else you need?" William's eyes met hers, and for a split second, she saw it again, that flicker of something unguarded. "No." He said, his tone firm, but quieter than before. Lauren nodded, turning to leave, but she couldn't resist a small test. "Nice tie, by the way," she said over her shoulder, her voice light. "Glad I could help." William's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. As she closed the door, Lauren felt a spark of satisfaction. He wasn't immune to her, and that was a start. Back at her desk, she pulled up an email from her sister Maya, who still lived in Harlem. "How's the fancy job?" it read. "Don't let those suits dim your shine." Lauren smiled, typing a quick reply. "Shining brighter than ever." Got a puzzle to solve up here. She thought of William, his rigid posture, the way he'd frozen at her touch. Most people would back off and respect the boundary. But Lauren wasn't like most people. She'd spent her life breaking through barriers. Glass ceilings, skeptical minds, closed doors. William's rule was just another challenge, and she was ready for it. As the day ended, Lauren stayed late organizing files for the next morning. The office grew quiet, the Manhattan skyline twinkling beyond the windows. She glanced at William's office, the light still on. He was there alone, as always. For a moment she imagined what it must be like to live so guarded to keep everyone at arm's length. It wasn't power, she realized, it was loneliness. Her resolve hardened. She wouldn't push him, not yet, but she'd listen, watch, and wait. William Carter might think his walls were unbreakable, but Lauren Brooks had a knack for finding cracks. And when she did, she'd be ready to see the truth. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across William Carter's office, the Manhattan skyline a glittering backdrop to his restless thoughts. The tie incident with Lauren Brooks lingered like an unwelcome guest, its memory disrupting the precise order he'd built his life around. William sat at his desk, a financial report open on his computer, but the numbers blurred. His fingers still tingling from where Lauren's had brushed his neck betrayed him. He'd enforced his no-touch rule with unwavering discipline, a shield against vulnerability for 20 years. Yet her touch, brief, unintentional, hadn't repelled him. Instead, it sparked something he couldn't name, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. He leaned back, his dark hair catching the light as he stared at the ceiling. The office was quiet, the hum of Carter Industries fading as employees left for the day. William's mind, however, drifted to a place he'd locked away 20 years ago, when he was a young heir, not yet the hardened CEO he'd become. The memory was vivid, as if etched in glass, and it pulled him back despite his resistance. He closed his eyes, and the past unfolded like a wound reopening. It was 2005, and William, then in his early 20s, stood in a crowded ballroom at a Wall Street gala. His father had just handed him the reins of Carter Industries, a daunting legacy for a man still finding his footing. Amid the clinking champagne glasses and murmured deals, he'd met Emily Harper. Her auburn hair and sharp wit had captivated him, her laughter a rare warmth in his high-stakes world. William, naive and eager to prove himself, believed she loved him. He'd given her everything, his trust, his dreams, his heart, envisioning a future where she stood by his side as he built his empire. But the illusion shattered at another gala, hosted by a rival firm. William had arrived late, his suit slightly rumpled from a long day. Emily was there, radiant in a silver gown, her arm linked with Victor Langston, a media mogul with twice William's influence. The room buzzed with whispers as William approached, his chest tight with unease. Emily's smile was cold, calculated. "William," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter, "you didn't think this was about love, did you?" The words landed like a blade, sharp and public. "You were a stepping stone," she continued, her eyes locked on his. "Victor's the real prize." The ballroom seemed to spin, the faces of colleagues and competitors blurring into a haze of pity and amusement. Once, a source of comfort, Emily's hand rested on Victor's arm, her touch a betrayal that burned. She leaned closer to William, her voice low but deliberate. "You were never enough." The humiliation was total, witnessed by the industry elite who'd later whisper about the young Carter's fall. That night, something inside William broke. He vowed never to let anyone close again, never to let touch deceive him. Physical contact became a trigger, a reminder of trust shattered in front of a crowd. In the present, William's hand tightened around his pen, the memory leaving a bitter taste. His no-touch rule wasn't just a quirk, it was survival. Every handshake offered, every accidental brush had sparked discomfort, a visceral echo of Emily's betrayal. He'd built Carter Industries into a fortress, his isolation a price he willingly paid. But Lauren's touch, that fleeting moment with the tie, hadn't triggered the usual recoil. It was warm, disarming, and that terrified him. Why her? Why now? A knock at the door snapped him back. Lauren stood there holding a folder, her navy blazer crisp against the soft waves of her dark curls. "The Tokyo Investor Notes," she said, placing the folder on his desk. Her movements were deliberate, respecting the distance he'd demanded. William nodded, avoiding her gaze. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks." Lauren paused, her fingers lingering on the folder. "Everything okay? You seem off." Her tone was gentle, not prying, but it carried that same curiosity he'd noticed. "I'm fine," he said, his voice sharper than intended. Lauren raised an eyebrow but didn't push. All right. I'll be at my desk if you need me. As she turned to leave, William's eyes followed her unbidden. Her confidence, her ease in a world he'd made cold, unsettled him. He thought of Emily's calculated charm. But Lauren was different, direct, unguarded. It made no sense yet. It stirred something he'd buried long ago. Alone again, William stood and walked to the window, the city sprawling below. Manhattan's relentless pace mirrored his own, but he felt out of step today. Lauren Brooks was a variable he hadn't accounted for, a crack in the system he'd perfected. He couldn't let her unravel him after 20 years of control. But as he adjusted his tie, still perfectly knotted from her hands, he felt the warmth of her touch linger. It wasn't repulsion. It was possible, which was more dangerous than anything he'd faced. He had to stay focused and keep her at arm's length. Yet deep down, he knew Lauren Brooks had already changed something, and there was no going back. The conference room on the 47th floor of Carter Industries buzzed with the low hum of preparation. It was Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and the executive team was gearing up for a critical board meeting. Lauren Brooks sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, her tablet open to a detailed investor report she'd finalized the night before. Her dark curls were pinned neatly, and her charcoal blazer was crisp, but her mind was only half on the numbers. Standing at the head of the table, William Carter commanded the room with his usual precision, his dark hair catching the light from the Manhattan skyline beyond the windows. Yet Lauren couldn't shake the memory of his reaction to her touch 2 days ago. His frozen stance, the flicker of vulnerability in his blue eyes. It was a puzzle, and she was piecing it together, one careful observation at a time. The meeting began with executives presenting quarterly projections. Lauren listened, jotting notes, but her attention kept drifting to William. He was all business, his voice steady, as he questioned a marketing VP about budget overruns. But she noticed small things, the way his fingers tightened around his pen when someone spoke too close, the subtle shift in his posture when a female colleague leaned in to point at a chart. His no-touch rule wasn't just a rumor, but a reflex woven into his every move. Yet when she'd fixed his tie, he hadn't recoiled. That contradiction intrigued her. As the meeting wrapped, William assigned tasks for the upcoming Tokyo investor call. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his tone clipped but not cold. "I need your analysis on the Tokyo portfolio by tomorrow. Focus on risk mitigation." Lauren nodded, meeting his gaze. "On it, Mr. Carter. I'll cross-reference the currency fluctuations." Her response was professional, but her steady eye contact carried a quiet challenge. William's jaw twitched almost imperceptibly before he moved on to the next task. Lauren suppressed a smile. She wasn't pushing his boundaries, not yet, but she was learning how to read him. Later in the break room, Lauren poured coffee, the aroma grounding her in the bustling office. James, the finance lead, joined her, his tie slightly loosened. "You're bold, Brooks," he said, grabbing a mug. "That look you gave Carter in there, most people don't dare hold his stare." Lauren shrugged, stirring cream into her coffee. "He's not a dragon, James, just a man with a weird hang-up." James laughed. "Weird's putting it mildly. But watch out, office gossip's already buzzing. People noticed you're not scared of him." Lauren's brow furrowed. "Gossip? About what?" James lowered his voice. "You're his new assistant, and you're different. They're watching to see if you crack his shell." Lauren's stomach tightened. She'd faced scrutiny before navigating corporate spaces where her confidence was often misread as defiance. But this was new. Her presence was stirring the office dynamic, and she hadn't even meant to. "Let them talk," she said, her voice firm. "I'm here to do my job, not play guessing games." But as she returned to her desk, she felt the weight of curious glances. Carter Industries was a pressure cooker, and her proximity to William was turning up the heat. That evening, a crisis hit. The Tokyo team sent an urgent request for revised financial models, due by midnight. Lauren stayed late, her desk lamp casting a soft glow as she crunched numbers. Around 9:30 p.m., she noticed William's office light still on. Curiosity tugged at her. She compiled the revised models, saved them to a flash drive, and knocked on his door. "Come in," he called, his voice weary. He was at his desk, sleeves rolled up, a rare hint of dishevelment in his usually pristine appearance. "Updated models," Lauren said, placing the flash drive on his desk, careful to keep her distance. William glanced at it, then at her. "You didn't need to stay this late." Lauren tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Neither did you, but here we are." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken questions. William's fingers hesitated over the drive, as if weighing whether to say more. "Your analysis was thorough," he said, finally, his tone softer. "Good work." Lauren nodded, surprised by the praise. "Thanks. I noticed the yen's volatility spiked last quarter. I flagged it in the report, and it might be worth a hedge strategy." William's eyes met hers, a spark of respect flickering. "Noted," he said. "I'll review it." Lauren turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Mr. Carter, why do you stay so late? This place doesn't run without you, but it doesn't own you." The question slipped out bolder than she'd intended. William stiffened, his pen stilling. "It's my responsibility," he said, his voice tight. But his eyes betrayed him, lingering on her with curiosity and unease. Lauren nodded, sensing she'd touched a nerve. "Fair enough," she said, leaving the door clicking shut behind her. Back at her desk, she felt a quiet thrill. She hadn't touched him, hadn't pushed, but she'd gotten under his skin. This wasn't about breaking his rule, but understanding the man behind it. William sat alone, the flash drive untouched. Lauren's question echoed, stirring memories he'd buried. He worked late because control was all he had control over, his company emotions and past. But her presence, her quiet confidence, was a variable he couldn't predict. She didn't flinch under his gaze or shrink from his silence. It unnerved him. Yet he replayed their exchange, her words cutting through his defenses. As the city lights twinkled outside, William realized something dangerous. Lauren Brooks was testing boundaries he wasn't sure he could keep. The Manhattan air carried a sharp chill, as October 2025 deepened the city's pulse, quickening with the approach of the annual Carter Industries charity gala. William Carter stood in his office, the 47th floor, a quiet fortress above the bustling streets. His dark hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit pristine, but his fingers tapped restlessly against his desk. The gala, a high-profile event at a midtown hotel, was necessary. Investors, board members, and socialites expected his presence. But tradition demanded a companion, a role he'd avoided for years, his no-touch rule making such pairings unthinkable. Yet today, as he reviewed the guest list, one name kept surfacing in his mind: Lauren Brooks. William's decision was impulsive, a rare crack in his calculated world. Lauren had been his assistant for 2 weeks, and her presence, her quiet confidence, her sharp insights had already disrupted his routine. Their late-night exchange over the Tokyo models lingered, her question about his long hours cutting deeper than he'd admitted. He couldn't shake how she'd looked at him, not with fear or deference, but with something like understanding. It unnerved him, yet he found himself drawn to it. Inviting her to the gala was risky, but the alternative, facing the event alone, dodging curious glances, felt worse. He pressed the intercom. "Ms. Brooks, my office." Moments later, Lauren appeared, her charcoal dress accentuating her poised frame, Dark curls swept into a low bun. She carried a tablet ready for another task. "Yes, Mr. Carter." William cleared his throat, his blue eyes meeting hers briefly before flicking to the window. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. Please attend as my companion. Strictly professional to represent the company." Lauren's eyebrow arched, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Companion. That's a new one. Any rules I should know about? William's jaw tightened, her tone too knowing. "Be discreet, dress appropriately, and stay by my side. That's all." Lauren tilted her head, studying him. "So no dancing, no small talk. Stand there and look pretty." "Got it." Her voice was light, but her eyes held a challenge. William didn't respond, his silence a shield. "Pick you up at 7:00, he said, turning to his computer. Lauren nodded, her smile lingering as she left. She knew mixed signals when she saw them, and William Carter was sending plenty. The next evening, Lauren stood outside her Harlem apartment, the streetlights glowing warmly. Her emerald gown hugged her curves, its flowing fabric elegant yet understated, her curls cascading in soft waves. When William's black sedan pulled up, he stepped out, his black tuxedo sharp against the night. He paused, his gaze lingering on her a moment too long. "You look suitable," he said. His voice clipped. Lauren smirked. "High praise, Mr. Carter. Let's go." As they drove to Midtown, the silence was charged, her presence filling the car with an energy he couldn't ignore. The gala was a spectacle, crystal chandeliers, live jazz, and servers weaving through a sea of designer gowns. William navigated the crowd with practiced ease, nodding to investors, his demeanor cool. Lauren stayed close, her poise matching his, but her warmth drew eyes. She chatted briefly with a tech CEO, her laugh bright but professional. William felt a pang of pride, perhaps, or something sharper. He dismissed it, focusing on a board member's question about stock projections. But the room shifted when a familiar figure approached Emily Harper. Emily's auburn hair gleamed under the lights, her silver dress a nod to the night she'd humiliated William 20 years ago. Her smile was sharp, her green eyes scanning Lauren before settling on him. "William," she said, her voice smooth but laced with old familiarity. "I didn't expect you with company." William's posture stiffened, his hand tightening around his champagne flute. "Emily." He said, his tone flat. Lauren sensed the tension, her instincts kicking in. She stepped closer, her arm brushing William's sleeve, not a touch, but a gesture of alliance. "I'm Lauren Brooks," she said, her smile warm but firm. "William's assistant." "And you are?" Emily's eyes narrowed, assessing. "Emily Harper. An old friend." Her pause was deliberate, her gaze flicking to William. He's always been so reserved. Surprising to see him with someone so engaging. Lauren's smile didn't waver. Maybe he just needed the right person to bring him out. The words were polite, but the subtext was clear. Emily's lips tightened, and she excused herself, her heels clicking as she retreated. William exhaled, his shoulders easing slightly. "That was unnecessary," he muttered. Lauren shrugged. She started it. "I just finished it." As the night wore on, Lauren's ease in the crowd, chatting with a philanthropist, deflecting a banker's overly familiar question, impressed William. She wasn't intimidated by the elite, and her Harlem roots gave her a grounded confidence that stood out in the glittering room. He caught himself watching her, the way her gown caught the light, the way her laugh softened the edges of his world. When she returned to his side, she raised an eyebrow. "You're staring, Mr. Carter." He looked away, his throat tight. "I'm observing," he said, but the lie felt thin. Lauren's presence was a challenge he hadn't anticipated. And as they left the gala, the city lights blurring past, William knew one thing: she was already closer than he'd ever allowed anyone to be. The charity gala at the Midtown Hotel pulsed with energy, the jazz band's notes weaving through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Lauren Brooks stood near the bar, her emerald gown catching the light as she sipped sparkling water. The evening had been a whirlwind, navigating investors' questions, deflecting Emily Harper's barbed comments, and staying close to William Carter, whose presence felt like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken tension. Lauren's confidence had carried her through her Harlem-honed instincts, keeping her sharp, but she couldn't ignore the way William's blue eyes followed her, a mix of restraint and something unguarded. William stood across the room, with a glass of untouched champagne in hand, his black tuxedo pristine, but with a rigid posture. The gala was a success. Donations were pouring in, and Carter Industries' reputation shone, but his focus was elsewhere. Lauren's bright and unforced laugh drew his gaze again and again. Her ease in this high-stakes world, her ability to charm without pandering, unsettled him. He'd invited her to keep up appearances to avoid the usual scrutiny of arriving alone. But now, watching her, he felt a pull. He couldn't name a dangerous breach of the walls he'd built over 20 years. The crowd parted, and Lauren moved to the bar to refresh her drink. A man approached Marcus Reed, a tech investor known for charm and wandering hands. Marcus leaned in, his smile wide as he complimented her gown. He said, "You're stealing the show tonight," his hand grazing her arm in a casual, deliberate gesture. Lauren smiled politely, stepping back to maintain distance, but the interaction sparked something in William. From across the room, he saw Marcus's hand, the easy familiarity, and a sharp, unfamiliar heat surged through him. Jealousy. It was irrational, unacceptable, but undeniable. William crossed the room in long, determined strides, his jaw tight. Lauren noticed him approaching, her brow furrowing as she caught the intensity in his eyes. "Mr. Carter," she said, turning from Marcus. Before she could say more, William took her arm firmly, but not roughly, and guided her toward a secluded balcony overlooking the city. The cool October air hit them as they stepped outside, the skyline twinkling below. Lauren pulled her arm free, crossing it over her chest. "What's this about?" I was mid-conversation. William ran a hand through his dark hair, his usual control fraying. "He was touching you," he said, his voice low, almost accusing. Lauren's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Marcus." It was a handshake-level touch, William. "What's the problem?" He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the city lights, his hands clenching at his sides. He didn't know why it bothered him so much, only that it did more than Emily's taunts or the gala's pressures. Lauren stepped closer, her voice softer but firm. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Her closeness, the scent of her jasmine perfume, overwhelmed him. For 20 years he'd avoided this proximity, vulnerability, the risk of feeling. But Lauren wasn't Emily. She wasn't calculating, wasn't here to use him. Her eyes held a challenge, but also a warmth that disarmed him. Without thinking, driven by a need he couldn't suppress, William cupped the back of her neck and kissed her. The kiss was fierce, urgent, releasing everything he'd held back. Lauren froze for a heartbeat, then responded, her hands gripping his lapels, pulling him closer. The world, the gala, the rules, the past faded, leaving only the heat of their connection. But as quickly as it began, William pulled back, his breath uneven. Reality crashed in, and panic followed. This was a mistake. He said, his voice cold, a shield snapping back into place. Lauren's eyes flashed with hurt, then anger. "A mistake," she repeated, stepping back. "You don't get to kiss me like that and call it a mistake, William." Her voice was steady, but the tremor beneath it cut him. If you're scared, fine. But don't play games with me. She turned her gown swirling as she returned to the gala, leaving him alone on the balcony. William's hand went to his lips, the taste of her lingering. He'd broken his rule, crossed a line he'd sworn never to approach. The kiss wasn't just a lapse, it was a surrender, and it terrified him. Emily's betrayal had taught him that closeness was a trap, that touch could lie. Yet Lauren's kiss felt true, and that was worse. He wanted to follow her to explain, but his feet stayed rooted. The city lights blurred below, mirroring the chaos in his mind. He'd pushed her away, but the truth was undeniable. Lauren Brooks had cracked something open in him, and closing it again felt impossible. Lauren rejoined the gala, her smile fixed, but her heart racing. She chatted with a donor, her poise unbroken. But William's words stung. She'd felt the intensity in his kiss, the way he'd held her, like she was the only thing that mattered. Yet he'd retreated just as she'd feared. Growing up in Harlem, she learned to stand her ground and fight for what mattered. William was a fight she hadn't expected, but she wasn't ready to give up. As she glanced at the balcony, his silhouette still visible, she knew this wasn't over. He could run, but she'd ensure he faced whatever this was. The Monday morning sun streamed through the glass walls of Carter Industries, casting sharp angles across the 47th floor. Lauren Brooks sat at her desk, her dark curls pinned neatly, her navy blouse crisp, despite the turmoil beneath her calm exterior. The charity gala lingered in her mind like a bruise. William Carter's fierce and unguarded kiss, followed by his cold dismissal. This was a mistake. The words had stung, cutting through the warmth of his touch. Lauren wasn't one to dwell, but the memory of his blue eyes torn between desire and fear haunted her. She'd returned to work, determined to stay professional, but the office felt different, charged with whispers and sidelong glances. The kiss on the balcony hadn't gone unnoticed. A junior analyst had glimpsed them, and the rumor mill was churning by morning. Lauren felt it in the way colleagues avoided her gaze, their conversations halting as she passed. James, the finance lead, approached her desk, his coffee mug in hand, his expression a mix of concern and amusement. "Rough weekend?" he asked, leaning against the cubicle. Lauren sighed, tapping her pen against her tablet. "You heard, didn't you?" James nodded. "Word travels fast. People saw you two at the gala. Now they're wondering if you're special." Lauren's jaw tightened. She'd navigated corporate scrutiny before, but her confidence was often misread as a threat in spaces like this. At 10:00 a.m., Lauren was summoned to a meeting with Margaret Voss, the head of HR. The conference room was stark, the air heavy with formality. Margaret, a stern woman with gray hair, wasted no time. "Ms. Brooks," she said, her tone clipped, "there's concern about your conduct at the gala. Your interaction with Mr. Carter has raised questions about professionalism." Lauren's stomach sank, but she kept her composure. "I attended as his companion per his request. If there's an issue, I'd like specifics." Margaret's lips pursed. "The perception of favoritism is the issue. You're new, and this could undermine your credibility." Lauren's fingers tightened around her notepad. She'd faced skepticism in corporate settings, and her competence was often questioned despite her credentials. But this felt personal, a judgment on her character. "I understand perception matters," she said evenly, "but my work speaks for itself. If Mr. Carter has concerns, he can address them directly." Margaret nodded, but her expression remained skeptical. "We'll monitor the situation. Keep things professional, Ms. Brooks." Back at her desk, Lauren's resolve hardened. She wouldn't let gossip derail her. But the encounter left a mark, a reminder of the stakes in this high-pressure world. When William's intercom buzzed, requesting her presence, she braced herself. She entered his office, her posture straight, her dark curls catching the light. William stood by the window, his back to her, his silhouette sharp against the skyline. "The Tokyo portfolio," he said without turning. "I need your revisions by noon." Lauren placed the revised report on his desk, her movements deliberate. "Done." "Anything else?" William turned, his blue eyes meeting hers, searching for something, anger perhaps, or accusation. "No," he said, his voice flat. But the silence that followed was heavy, charged with the unspoken. Lauren took a breath, her voice steady but pointed. "If we're going to work together, I need clarity." "The gala. What was that?" "Because I don't play games, William." William's jaw clenched, his hand gripping the back of his chair. "It was a mistake," he repeated, but the words lacked conviction. Lauren stepped closer, not touching, but close enough to make him tense. "You don't kiss someone like that by mistake. If you're scared, say it, but don't hide behind professionalism." Her words cut, echoing the truth he couldn't face. He wanted to explain about Emily, about the walls he'd built, but the words wouldn't come. "We need boundaries," he said instead, his voice cold. "This can't happen again." Lauren's eyes flashed with frustration, but she nodded. "Fine. Boundaries it is." She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply. At the door she paused, glancing back. "But you're not fooling me, William. You felt something, and you can't undo that." The door closed behind her, leaving William alone with the weight of her words. He sank into his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of the report she'd left. She was right. He'd felt it, and it terrified him. Once his sanctuary, the office now felt like a battleground with Lauren at the center of a fight he wasn't sure he could win. Lauren returned to her desk, her heart pounding. She'd meant every word, but the HR meeting and William's retreat unsettled her. This wasn't just about a kiss. It was about trust, and whether William could ever let her in. She opened her tablet, focusing on work, but the whispers around her lingered. The corporate world was watching, and she knew one thing: navigating William Carter's walls would be her most formidable challenge yet. The late October sky hung heavy over Manhattan, a gray veil muting the city's usual vibrancy. Inside Carter Industries' 47th floor, Lauren Brooks worked under the soft glow of her desk lamp. The office nearly deserted as the clock neared 8:00 p.m. Her dark curls were loose, framing her face, and her navy sweater was a quiet contrast to the tension she carried. The fallout from the gala kiss lingered like a storm that wouldn't break. William Carter's cold dismissal. This was a mistake echoed in her mind, as did the HR meeting that followed its warning about perception, a sharp reminder of the corporate world's scrutiny. Lauren was no stranger to navigating high-stakes environments, but this felt different. It was personal. She focused on a financial report, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her tablet, but her heart wasn't in it. William's retreat had hurt more than she'd expected. His kiss, fierce and unguarded, had felt like a promise only for him to pull back, hiding behind his walls. Lauren prided herself on resilience, never letting anyone dim her light, but doubt crept in. Was she chasing something impossible? She'd faced closed doors before, but Williams felt like a fortress, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to keep knocking. Her phone buzzed, a call from her sister Maya, who still lived in their childhood Harlem brownstone. Lauren answered, her voice softer than usual. "Hey, Maya." On the other end, Maya's tone was warm but probing. "You sound off, sis. What's going on up in that fancy office?" Lauren sighed, leaning back in her chair, the city lights twinkling beyond the window. "It isn't very easy. My boss, he's not like anyone I've met. He's got these walls, and I thought I was getting through, but now I'm unsure." Her voice cracked, betraying her. "I'm falling for him, Maya, and it's scaring me. What if he never lets me in?" Maya's pause was gentle, familiar. "You've always been the one to push through, Lauren. Remember when you got that youth center funded? You didn't quit even when they laughed you out of the room, but you can't force someone to open up. If he's running, you must decide how long you'll chase. Lauren's throat tightened, her sister's words cutting through her defenses. I know, she whispered, but he's not just running from me. It's like he's running from himself. Unbeknownst to her, William stood in the hallway, his silhouette obscured by the dim light. He'd been leaving his office briefcase in hand when he overheard her voice. Her words stopped him cold, vulnerable, raw, a side of her he hadn't seen. Her confidence and poise had always seemed unshakable, but now he heard the doubt, the fear. His chest tightened, guilt settling like a weight. For weeks he'd pushed her away, clinging to his no-touch rule, his fear of betrayal. But hearing her now, he realized the cost of his retreat, not just to himself, but to her. Lauren ended the call, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. She stood gathering her things, unaware of William's presence. As she turned off her lamp, he stepped forward. His dark hair slightly tousled, his suit jacket unbuttoned in a rare moment of disarray. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice low. Lauren startled, her hand pausing on her bag. "Mr. Carter, I didn't see you." She straightened her guard, snapping back, though her eyes were still glossy. "Need something?" William hesitated, his blue eyes searching hers. He'd planned to keep his distance to reinforce the boundaries he'd set after the gala. But her vulnerability, overheard in that quiet moment, changed something. He said, "I owe you an apology." The words were awkward, unpracticed for the gala. "I shouldn't have dismissed you." Lauren's brow furrowed, surprise mingling with wariness. "You said it was a mistake. Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" Her directness cut, as always. William ran a hand through his hair, his usual control fraying. "I wasn't lying. I was scared." The admission hung between them, heavy in the quiet office. Lauren's lips parted, but she didn't speak, waiting. He took a breath, his voice softer. "I've spent years keeping people out. It's easier, safer. But you—" He stopped, his throat tight. "You make me question that, and I don't know how to handle it." Lauren studied him, her heart pounding. She saw the truth in his eyes, the same vulnerability she'd glimpsed when she fixed his tie. But her hurt held her back. "William, I can't keep guessing what you want. I'm not here to break you or fix you. I need to know you're in this too." Her voice was steady, but the weight of her words was clear. She wasn't just his assistant. She was a woman risking her heart. William nodded, his jaw tight. He said, "I don't have an answer yet, and his honesty is raw. But I'm trying. Can you give me time?" Lauren's gaze softened, but she didn't let him off easily. "Time's fine, but don't expect me to wait forever." She slung her bag over her shoulder, her heels clicking as she walked away. At the elevator, she glanced back, their eyes meeting across the dim floor. For the first time, she saw fear in his gaze and a flicker of hope. William stood alone, the silence deafening. Lauren's words echoed her vulnerability, a mirror to his own. He'd hurt her, not by intent, but by habit, and that realization shook him. The Manhattan skyline glittered outside, indifferent to his turmoil. He knew he had to change, not just for her, but for himself. But the path forward was uncharted. For a man who thrived on control, that was the most terrifying prospect. The Manhattan morning was crisp, the late October light filtering through the glass walls of Carter Industries' 47th floor. William Carter stood in his office, his dark hair neatly combed, his tailored suit, a familiar armor, but his hands betrayed a subtle tremor as he reviewed a contract. Lauren Brooks' words from the previous night echoed, "Time's fine, but don't expect me to wait forever." Her vulnerability, overheard in her call with her sister, had shaken him. For years he'd clung to his no-touch rule, a shield against the pain of Emily Harper's betrayal. But Lauren's hurt, her quiet strength, forced him to face the truth. His fear was hurting them both. William had started therapy weeks ago, a secret he kept even from his closest advisors. The sessions in a discreet midtown office were grueling, forcing him to unravel the humiliation of that long-ago gala when Emily had publicly dismissed him. He'd learned to name his fear, not just of touch, but of trust of being seen as insufficient. The therapist's words lingered. Your rule protected you, but it's also a prison. William resisted, but Lauren's presence, her warmth and refusal to shrink, made him question whether he could stay locked away forever. Today was different. The company's monthly all-staff meeting loomed a routine gathering in the sleek conference room. William usually kept these brief, his presence commanding but distant. But as he prepared, he felt a shift. Lauren's challenge wasn't just about their relationship and who he wanted to be. He couldn't keep hiding, not if he wanted a chance with her or himself. The thought was terrifying, but for the first time, he didn't want to run. The conference room was filled with employees, and the air buzzed with anticipation and deference. Lauren sat near the back, her navy blazer crisp, her dark curls pulled into a low bun. She focused on her tablet, her posture professional but guarded after last night's confrontation. William took the podium, his blue eyes scanning the room. He delivered updates on quarterly earnings, his voice steady, but then he paused, his fingers gripping the podium's edge. One more thing, he said, his tone quieter. I've been rigid in ways that haven't served this company or myself. The room stilled, eyes widening. William took a breath, his heart pounding. Connection matters even here. I haven't always made it easy. He stepped from the podium, approaching Sarah, a senior analyst seated nearby. Sarah, your work on the Tokyo deal was exceptional, he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, aware of his rule, but shook it, her expression stunned. A murmur rippled through the room. William moved on, shaking hands with two more female colleagues, each touch deliberate, a quiet rebellion against his past. Lauren watched, her breath catching. She knew what this meant. William was breaking his own rules, not just for her, but for himself. His eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of vulnerability passing between them. The meeting ended, and as employees filed out whispering about the new, Carter, Lauren stayed behind her tablet, forgotten. William approached his suit jacket, unbuttoned, a rare sign of ease. Ms. Brooks, he said, his voice low. Can we talk? They stepped into a quiet corner of the conference room, the Manhattan skyline framing them. Lauren crossed her arms, her gaze steady. That was unexpected, she said, nodding toward the room. What's changed? William's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. He said, I'm trying to be better, not just for you, but for me. I've been in therapy working through things. I don't want to be the man who pushes everyone away. His honesty was raw, unguarded, a far cry from the CEO who'd called their kiss a mistake. Lauren's heart softened, but she held her ground. I'm glad you're trying, William. But I meant what I said last night. I can't keep guessing where I stand. William nodded, his blue eyes earnest. I know. I'm not good at this trust closeness. But I want to try with you. Can we start over? Not as boss and assistant, but as two people figuring this out. He extended his hand, not for a handshake, but as an offer, a gesture of trust. Lauren studied him, her fingers twitching at her side. She thought of her mother's words. Never let fear stop you from seeing the truth. William's fear was still there, but so was his effort. She took his hand, her touch firm but gentle, their fingers lingering longer than necessary. Okay, she said, her voice soft but resolute. But this time we're honest. No running. William's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile, the first she'd seen. "No running," he promised. As they left the conference room, the office buzzed with the aftershock of William's actions. Lauren felt the weight of curious eyes, but for once it didn't faze her. William's handshake with Sarah, his offer to her, was a step beyond their connection, a sign he was confronting his past. The city outside gleamed, its energy mirroring the shift between them. Lauren knew this was just a beginning, fragile but real, and for the first time, she believed William might be ready to meet her halfway. The November chill settled over Manhattan, the city's lights a kaleidoscope against the early evening sky. Inside a quiet Brooklyn restaurant, far from the polished sheen of Carter Industries' 47th floor, Lauren Brooks sat across from William Carter, a candle flickering between them. Her dark curls framed her face, her burgundy dress a soft contrast to the stark corporate world they'd left behind. William's suit was less formal tonight. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his blue eyes were fixed on the menu, but he was not reading it. Their agreement to start over had led to this dinner, a tentative step towards something neither could fully name. The air between them was heavy with possibility and the weight of unspoken truths. Lauren sipped her wine, her gaze steady but guarded. William's breakthrough at the staff meeting, shaking hands with colleagues, admitting his need to change, had shifted something in her. His honesty, raw and unpolished, had cracked her defenses, but the memory of his retreat after their gala kiss lingered. She'd laid her heart bare that night in the office, admitting her fear of chasing someone who might never stay. Now she needed to know if he was truly in this, or if she was setting herself up for another fall. William set his menu down, his fingers tracing the table's edge. Therapy had forced him to confront his past, Emily Harper's betrayal, the public humiliation that had shaped his no-touch rule. But Lauren wasn't Emily. Her warmth, her resilience challenged everything he'd believed about trust. He'd spent weeks wrestling with his fear, but her vulnerability had changed him. Tonight, he wanted to be honest, no matter the cost. "Lauren," he said, his voice low, "I need to tell you something." She raised an eyebrow, her lips curving slightly. "This sounds serious. Should I brace myself?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were searching, ready for truth or disappointment. William took a breath, his hands stilling. "I've been running from you because of what happened 20 years ago." He paused, his gaze dropping to the candle's flame. "Emily didn't just leave me. She humiliated me in front of everyone who mattered, making me feel like I was nothing. I built walls to protect myself, never to feel that again. But you make those walls feel like a cage." Lauren's heart softened, but she stayed quiet, letting him continue. William's voice grew more silent, raw. "I've been in therapy trying to understand why I'm like this. Why do I push people away? But with you, it's different. You don't let me hide, and that scares me. But it also makes me want to try." He met her eyes, his vulnerability laid bare. "I love you, Lauren. I don't know how to do this right, but I don't want to lose you." The words hung between them, heavy and true. Lauren's breath caught her fingers tightening around her glass. She'd waited for this, hoped for it, but hearing it now felt overwhelming. She thought of her struggles losing her mother young, fighting for respect in a corporate world that often overlooked her. Her mother echoed, "Never let fear stop you from seeing the truth." William's confession was the truth, but it came with a risk. "William," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I've been hurt before too. Not like you, but I know what it's like to guard your heart. I'm falling for you, but I'm scared you'll run again." William's throat tightened, her honesty mirroring his own. "I know I've hurt you," he said. "The gala, the way I pulled back, I was wrong. I'm still learning, but I'm here. I want this us. Lauren studied him, her eyes tracing the lines of his face, the earnestness in his gaze. She wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. If we do this, she said, it has to be real. No half measures. I need you to show up, not just say it. He nodded his hand, reaching the table, stopping short of hers. I will, he said, his voice firm. But I would like to know what you need too. I'm not good at this, Lauren, but I'm trying. She smiled, a slight genuine curve of her lips. I need you to be honest even when it's hard, and I need you to trust me not just with your words, but your actions. She paused, her voice softening. I'm not her William. I'm not going anywhere unless you push me away. The waiter arrived, breaking the moment, but their eyes stayed locked as ordered. Over dinner, they talked not about work, but their lives. Lauren shared stories of her Harlem childhood, the community center she'd fought for, and how her mother's laughter still guided her. William spoke of his early days at Carter Industries, the pressure to prove himself, and the loneliness of his success. Their vulnerabilities wove together a fragile bridge between them. William offered his hand. As they left the restaurant, the Brooklyn streets alive with evening bustle. Lauren took at their fingers, intertwining a quiet promise in the touch. They walked to his car, the city's hum a backdrop to their silence. Lauren glanced at him, her heart lighter, but cautious. This doesn't mean we're fixed, she said, her tone teasing but serious. But it's a start. William's lips twitched, a rare smile breaking through. A start I can live with. William felt a shift as he drove her home, the Manhattan skyline fading behind them. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. And with Lauren's hand still warm, he dared to believe he could keep moving forward. The spring of 2026 bloomed over Manhattan, the city's energy softened by cherry blossoms lining the streets. Inside Carter Industries' 47th floor, the usual hum of corporate life paused for a rare moment of celebration. A company-wide event billed as a Team Appreciation Day filled the conference room with laughter and clinking glasses. Lauren Brooks stood near a table of hors d'oeuvres, her dark curls loose, her teal dress vibrant against the sleek decor. She chatted with James, the finance lead, her smile bright, but her thoughts were on William Carter. Their dinner in Brooklyn months ago had been a turning point, his confession of love, a fragile bridge they'd both crossed. Since then, their relationship had grown quietly, stolen glances in meetings, late-night talks about their dreams, hands brushing with newfound ease. William had changed. His no-touch rule, once a fortress, had crumbled through therapy and his commitment to Lauren. He now greeted colleagues with handshakes, his blue eyes carrying a warmth that surprised the office. Lauren had seen him grow, not just for her, but for himself, confronting the pain of Emily Harper's betrayal. Their bond, built on honesty and shared vulnerability, felt like home, something Lauren hadn't expected in the corporate world she'd fought to join. But today, as she caught William's gaze across the room, she sensed something more was coming. William stood near this podium, his dark hair neatly combed, his suit tailored but unbuttoned, a nod to the ease he'd embraced. His heart raced, a feeling he no longer fought. Lauren had changed everything, her resilience, warmth, and how she challenged him to improve. He'd planned this moment for weeks, not with the extravagance of his CEO persona, but with the sincerity she'd taught him. As the room quieted, he stepped forward, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Everyone, a moment, please. The crowd turned, murmurs fading. Lauren's brow furrowed, her hand pausing on her glass. William's eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. Lauren Brooks, he said, his voice carrying across the room. You've been my assistant, my challenge, my everything. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. He stepped closer, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I spent years building walls thinking they'd protect me, but you showed me they were holding me back. You made me want to be more, to live more. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring, its sparkle understated but radiant. Will you marry me, Lauren, and let me spend my life proving I'm worthy of you? Lauren's breath caught her eyes, glistening. The room blurred, the weight of his words sinking in. She thought of her mother's advice, never let fear stop you from seeing the truth, and saw it now, in William's vulnerability, his love laid bare in front of their colleagues. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears. You're already worthy, William. Yes, I'll marry you. The room erupted in cheers, James whistling loudly. William slid the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling, then pulled her into a gentle embrace, his lips brushing her forehead. For the first time, he didn't hesitate to touch her, and the office saw a new William Carter, open, unafraid. 6 months later, a Harlem church glowed with summer light, its stained glass windows casting colors over the pews. Lauren stood in a flowing white gown, her dark curls adorned with tiny flowers, her smile radiant as she looked at William. He stood at the altar, his tuxedo sharp, his blue eyes fixed on her, with a certainty he'd never known. The congregation, a mix of Harlem neighbors, Carter Industries, colleagues, and Lauren's family, filled the space with warmth. James, the best man, grinned from the side, whispering, "Never thought I'd see Carter like this." The vows were heartfelt, Lauren's voice steady as she spoke of love as a choice, a fight worth winning. "You showed me trust is worth the risk," she said, her eyes locked on William's. He responded, his voice thick. "You gave me a home I didn't know I needed." When they said, "I do," the church erupted applause, mingling with joyful shouts. At the reception held in a nearby community center, Lauren had helped build the dance floor pulsed with music. Despite his protests, William let Lauren pull him into a slow dance, her laughter easing his awkward steps. As fireworks lit the Harlem sky, William held Lauren close, her head resting against his chest. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered, his voice soft. She looked up, her smile warm. "You have me, William. Always." He kissed her gently, the world fading around them. The man who'd once lived behind walls now stood open, his love for Lauren, a new beginning that felt like forever.